Bible Lessons Daily. Ancient truth for modern life.
The sun was setting over the hills of Ramah, and inside Elkanah's household, the air was filled with the laughter of children and the noise of daily life. But there was one woman living entirely in the shadows of that joy. Her name was Hannah. For years, her womb remained empty, while her rivals' children filled the house. Looking at this diagram of ancient Israel's social hierarchy, we can see why this silence was so devastating. A woman's honor, her societal value, and her long-term financial security were tied directly to the presence of male heirs. Without a child, a woman in this era possessed almost no social safety net. The isolation was made worse by Peninnah, Elkanah's other wife. Peninnah had many sons and daughters, and she used her fertility as a weapon. Every day she found opportunities to remind Hannah of her empty arms, letting her taunts land like daggers to ensure her rival felt the full weight of her failure. Elkanah deeply loved Hannah. During feast days, he would give her the choicest cuts of meat, trying to compensate for her grief with affection. He would sit beside her and ask, "Am I not more to you than 10 sons?" His love was real, but a husband's devotion cannot solve a spiritual ache. Hannah rose every morning, served her family, and kept her composure without returning Peninnah's cruelty. She lived within every societal rule, doing everything expected of her, yet the heaven she prayed to remained completely silent. That tension reached its limit during the annual pilgrimage to Shiloh. This was a time of communal celebration and thanksgiving, but for Hannah, the festival only amplified her private grief. Surrounded by families celebrating their blessings, her own lack was impossible to ignore. One particular year, the pain became too heavy to carry. Hannah pushed away the food, slipped out of the noisy festival, and walked alone toward the tabernacle. She left the crowds behind to confront the silence of God directly. Kneeling by the altar, she made a vow that changed her life. She whispered, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look upon your servant's misery and give me a son, then I will give him back to you." She promised that for his entire life, the boy would be dedicated to God's service. This wasn't a standard negotiation for social status. In the very moment she asked for the one thing she wanted most in the world, she offered to let it go. She was seeking a miracle, not for her own comfort, but for a higher purpose. As she prayed, her whole body shook. Her lips moved, but no sound escaped. Watching from the entrance was Eli, the priest. Seeing her strange, silent trembling in the dim light, he assumed she had spent too much time at the festival's wine jars. "How long will you stay drunk? Put away your wine," Eli demanded. At her most vulnerable moment, Hannah was shamed by the very man who was supposed to represent God's mercy. Hannah didn't snap back. She looked up and answered softly, "No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I was pouring out my soul before the Lord." Her honesty stilled the old priest. His voice lowered as he replied, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked." Something shifted in Hannah that no doctor or husband could achieve. She stood up, wiped her face, and walked back to the camp. For the first time in years, her appetite returned, and her face was no longer downcast, even though she was not yet pregnant. She had left her burden at the altar. By the time she returned to her family, she had already found an internal peace that didn't depend on the physical outcome. When the family returned to Ramah, the silence finally broke. Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son, naming him Samuel, which means, "Because I asked the Lord for him." The next few years were bittersweet. Hannah nursed Samuel and watched him grow, knowing every milestone brought her closer to honoring her promise. Every smile and every step was a reminder that her time with him was temporary. Once the boy was weaned, Hannah returned to Shiloh. Standing in the same temple where she had once wept in the shadows, she presented her young son to Eli. She didn't hesitate. She handed her miracle over to the priest to be raised in the house of God. This was the true cost of her covenant. It is easy to make a promise in a moment of desperation, but Hannah kept hers when the joy was at its peak, proving her vow was a sincere commitment. The impact of that sacrifice is visible on this timeline. The boy Hannah gave away grew up to be the prophet Samuel, who guided a struggling people and eventually anointed King David. A nation's history was redirected by a mother's decision to let go. God's response to her faithfulness was more than she ever asked for. Hannah was eventually blessed with 5 more children, and her home was filled with the laughter she had once been denied. Her story of barrenness was replaced by a song of praise that would be recorded for generations. Those years of silence and mocking from Peninnah weren't wasted. They forged a durable faith in Hannah, the kind of strength required to raise a child who would change the world. The pain she endured was the very soil her legacy needed to grow. Hannah's life shows us that personal anguish, when surrendered, can become a catalyst for something much larger than ourselves. She prayed through her pain, and in doing so,
What lesson spoke to your heart today? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe for daily Bible wisdom.